Do you remember your first swimming lesson? Chances are someone taught you how to swim. A lifeguard, your parents, a family member. And with each lesson, you got better, more comfortable. Learning a new skill does take time and repetition. Not everyone is born a great swimmer or a great communicator. You've probably heard it takes 10,000 hours of practice to master a skill. But the guy who developed the 10,000 hours rule, Malcolm Gladwell, says it's not just the practice that makes a master. You have to also have a good teacher. Hi, I'm Lori Johns. People are sometimes surprised to hear that I was a shy kid. In fact, so shy that no one would have predicted I'd make a living in front of the microphone. But with practice and great teachers, I moved beyond my crippling shyness into the high-profile world of TV news, where I interviewed presidents, authors, even Oprah. In this episode of ChopTalk, you'll meet some folks who are teaching and learning how to connect Iowans with agriculture. The Iowa Pork Producers Leadership Academy, IPLA, doesn't require a 10,000-hour commitment, but it does require good teachers to make sure that graduates get comfortable stepping up to the podium. Finding those good teachers and developing the program is Corey Van Gilst's job. His goals are straightforward.
So from my perspective and from Iowa Pork's perspective, we want to connect with our participants. We want to connect with those producers so then they can go ahead and connect with their communities. We're giving them the tools and the abilities to communicate about what they're doing on their farm, why they are doing what they are doing, and then how does that impact the consumer. So we're trying to build up these group of producers, these allied industry members that are young professionals. They're going to try and be leaders within the state of Iowa. They're going to make sure that the state of Iowa knows what they're up to.
So you have farmers, but you may have veterinarians too. You have folks who work on the hog barns or helping people put hog barns together, but they're not all 100% farmers, are they?
No, they are not. We have a lot of different people coming from a lot of different areas in the industry because it is an incredibly diverse industry. As you mentioned, we have veterinarians, we have swine health professionals that are helping out, nutritionists, feed salesmen. There's a whole host of people that impact the pork industry directly through their businesses, but don't actually have pigs themselves.
Well, you've always heard that old adage, it takes a village to raise a kid today. Well, it takes a village to raise pigs today, too, doesn't it? And that's certainly the case in small-town Iowa.
Absolutely. We need people growing the corn that's going to be fed to the pigs. We need to get that corn made into feed. We need to get that feed made to the barns and then distributed. You can sit there and ponder a million different ways that people in the state of Iowa are helping pork producers.
So we kind of know you get a wide range of folks who come from rural Iowa, and the idea is getting them engaged in their community to talk about what they do and, how the whole cycle is all connected. What kind of things do they learn in the academy?
So they learn quite a few different things, and we try and give it a holistic approach. It's a year-long program, so there's 5 different stages to it. And the first 2 are more orientation and leadership training, communication training, and things like that. The goal there is to give them the ability to communicate these things. They want to give them an understanding of how do we talk about the pork industry. It also gives them a certain awareness because you don't know what other people don't know. I grew up on a hog farm, so I know what we do and why we do it. And then my wife, who is not at all from the farm, has no idea what we're doing. In that same sense, a lot of consumers don't know what they don't know in the same way that producers don't know or those in the allied industry don't know. So making them aware of what consumers are wanting to know and how to communicate that properly is really important. And we do that by giving them the tools to understand their personal strengths, their abilities to communicate, how they work well with teams to make them better at their jobs, but then also making them aware of how they can positively impact their community and communicate what's going on the farm too.
So they're starting from ground zero. And all that people might know about pig farming is the price of a pork loin at the grocery store, and that's it. The rest of it is, what they see on Dr. Google, right? Like they learn more about pig farming from Google than they do from farmers. So here comes Corey to the rescue. I'm like, okay, we're going to help folks tell their story and build those connections. It must feel really good to be able to do that.
It is, and it's awesome because it's a great story to tell. And that's the wonderful thing. Like you're going to get asked what you may think is an easy question, but of course you think it's an easy question. You grew up with this, or this is your job. And people have such a need for that understanding that it's just like a sponge of information that you have that's completely dry, and you get to water that sponge with all your wonderful information about the pork industry. So not getting too into the weeds right away. Starting at the very basics. People are curious. They want to know. Right. And how do you have a conversation about that? How do you not get defensive when people say, well, isn't pork production bad for the state of Iowa? You can answer in a positive way. No, it's not. And then have the resources to explain why it's not and how it continues to help the state of Iowa.
And that sounds really familiar. When I went to talk to a group of young farmers one time, and they were all getting into social media because we were talking about specifically how to engage media. And being an old-time TV reporter myself, I was always interested in how people's stories get told, right? And I would say, okay, that's great. So tell me, you're on Twitter? Yes, every hand went up. You're on Facebook? Oh, every hand. Instagram? Oh, every hand goes up. And I said, great. Who do you follow? And they started pointing at each other in the room. So they follow each other, or they follow their ag teacher, or they might follow the guy who they rent the farm from. None of them were following media. So go outside your comfort zone, meet new people, follow other people. So, I mean, when you talk about social media or you talk about communication, it is, I think, really important to help them get outside of that comfort zone, right? And I know you guys work on that.
Exactly. And yeah, getting outside your comfort zone and making outside your comfort zone even more comfortable is very important, because it's hard for someone to dislike someone that you get to know personally. It just is. And again, we want people to understand that there are real people making these decisions about raising pigs indoors here in the state of Iowa. It's going to get really cold here. It's going to be really nice for them to be indoors. But how do you tell that story without being personable? Without saying, like, hey, I'm a person just like you. I too care about all these things. And when you're engaging your community, whether it be someone on a flight that you meet randomly, whether it be a county supervisor, whether it be your next door neighbor that doesn't have any animals, they're just living out in the country, enjoying the wide expanse that Iowa is alongside you. When you get to build those personal relationships and be comfortable and confident in those, that makes your permission to operate so much easier to get to.
How important do you think it is that people build that bridge, to build that connection? What do you think are the results? I mean, how do you know if this is work, if we're having engagement, if this is working? And you're new in this position too, in this role. So, hey, sky's the limit. Great opportunities, right? So how do you know? What are your goals?
So I think the program has been long successful before I got to the scene. I'm just honored to be able to take it on by the horns and continue to lead it on. We had to take a little bit of a hiatus there the past year and a half, but we're happy to be back completely. For me, the first goal is not going somewhere necessarily. It's maintaining what we have here in the state of Iowa. Iowans have been great for pork producers. They've been great for the pork industry. It helps that we're the best at it. A lot of pride in saying that, but they've been very, very gracious in allowing pork producers to operate to the best of pork producers' abilities. I want to maintain that here in the state of Iowa, and that comes with that relationship building. That is the utmost importance for me in this program, is developing leaders that can continue to be successful on farm, just raising pigs and making a profit, feeding their families. That's important, feeding the world and making sure they have enough money to keep doing it. But the second half of that is making sure that their local communities, their counties, the larger cities around them understand what they're doing. I want Iowans to continue to trust pork producers to do what they do best, which is raise safe, sustainable pork to feed the world. That's the ultimate goal, is to maintain what we have. And I think there's also room for growth. We have so few producers these days.
I mean, what is it, 1%, 2%?
2% of the U.S. populace is on a farm. We're getting to the point now where my grandma and grandpa farmed, or my great-grandpa and grandma farmed. And they're becoming further and further away. And that's fine, because we're raising more food on less land with less labor. It's great.
We're more efficient.
Yeah, we're far more efficient than we ever have been. But that comes also at a cost of people are less informed. So how do we make sure that this small little sliver of Iowa's population has the ability to raise food for the rest of it in the best manner possible? And that's by building those relationships. That's by understanding, hey, I can be a good leader in this area and this area. Hey, I can talk about this. I can go to my local county supervisor meeting and advocate for pork producers, either as an allied member or as a producer myself. And then I have friends in this community that support me because I've worked on building a personal relationship with them. I've given of my time, of my efforts, of my knowledge. I've invited them onto my farm, showcased to them. I've talked about all the wonderful things that pork production does, and now they have my back too. I can continue to farm the way that we've always farmed, which is continuous improvement.
Right, and that's the goal. Isn't that the goal for human beings in general?
Yes, exactly. And that's all we're asking for, is a conversation and an opportunity for trust to be built. We're not asking you to trust us blindly. We understand that trust needs to be earned. Producers understand that, that trust needs to be earned, and that respect factor needs to be there. And that comes through hard work and commitment on both sides. And we want producers to be able to take that first step to building that relationship. And that's the whole point of IPLA.
Helen Keller once said, "A well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers." It's not just folks who don't farm who have questions. Farmers also want to know how to be that resource for curious minds. That's why pig farmers like Brady Reichs got involved with the Iowa Pork Leadership Academy.
I think you grow up in your world and you leave, you go to college or, you get a different job and you start to understand there's a lot of people that don't understand farming. And I don't think that they think good or bad, they just don't understand. And oftentimes I figured out as I met people that they got information from maybe someone who didn't put farming in a good light. They didn't hear the story from the farmer. And I think that's partially just who farmers are. They're just not, they don't like to talk about themselves, and it's not really what you do, right? You kind of keep to yourself and keep your head down. So I think that's where maybe some of the questions happen. Maybe there was always people were hiding what they were doing, how their food was made. And so I think my generation, we've tried to educate people about what we do, why we do it. And I think people usually, once they understand it, feel pretty good about it. Yeah, I think Iowa Pork Leadership Academy helped me develop the skills to do that. It helped me connect with other people in the industry that are passionate. It was a way to kind of almost spur a passion to be involved and to tell your story through whatever avenue you want to. Local pork. I'm president of my County Pork Producers Association. Actually having a banquet tonight. Try to be involved in anything that locally supports ag. So I think you get motivated to tell your story, and then you look for places to be able to tell your story.
Well, and I see you looking for opportunities to tell your story on Facebook. You guys have a Facebook page, don't you?
Yes. So we hired someone from Iowa State 2 or 3 years ago as somewhat what we call a communications specialist or coordinator. And my sister Kaylee is deeply involved with that too. And so she has the skills to figure out what to put on social media, how often to put it on there. And so, yeah, we put effort into that, invested in someone, and she's taken the time to understand what we do and tell that story, whether it's we're applying manure in the fall or we're giving away holiday hams to local food banks, or here's what happens in a sow farm, things like that keep people interested and hopefully shed a positive light on farming.
Absolutely. What do you think is one of the biggest questions that people have on social media? I mean, it's a different game because your generation grew up with cell phones and cell phone cameras and social media and that sort of thing. And in my generation, you should just pick up the paper and learn the news. Now it's coming from so many different places. And let me just say, they're not all news. And you know that.
There are people that will say that my story is not the right story. So we have to, we're better off not debating those people and saying what's wrong. We're better off talking about what's good, in my opinion, most of the time. So if you don't tell your story, somebody else will. I think that's how I'd characterize that in today's day and age. There's no fact checking, or there doesn't have to be, or some sort of, there's no editor like at a newspaper, right, that worry about the reputation. Is just kind of whatever you want to put out there. So it forces us to tell our story and be active.
Absolutely. So in addition to the duties you do with, your local pork chapter and your local community, well, tell me some of the stuff you do there in the community. I mean, with the schools or maybe the kids and, your family, how they get involved, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Thanks for asking. We do something called Farm Chat, where I participated in it before, where local schools will do sometimes it's difficult with internet connection in barns, but like sow farms or finishers, have a caretaker explain to, young children, kindergarten, first, second grade. This is what happens in a pig barn, right? You get to see it without being in there. Obviously, it's difficult. Biosecurity makes it difficult to have people in the barn, and it's just also somewhat of a logistical challenge. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and you take a pig in and let the kids pet it, and they'll just ask casual questions, they'll ask kind of interesting 5-year-old
innocent
questions, like what happens to a pig, how does it get made into bacon, those sort of questions. It's great to be able to feel like you can answer those questions other than someone else. Yeah, those are a couple of examples of things I think we do try to do to educate. It's important to give back, because without the people in this community, we wouldn't be able to run the business we run. So, we've done different variations of things where, we'll kind of randomly show up in a area that we operate in and give away, 100 hams and broadcast it on Facebook. Employees thinks it's fun. Employees enjoy it. During COVID, we tried to, help. Had access to some masks, and those were hard to find, and give them away to local hospitals. Just things like that show that we care. and we're really committed to the communities we live in, and we're very aware of our responsibility to be good community members, and we plan on being a part of the community for a long time.
Absolutely. And I know the people that are up there in your area are going to love that too, because it just takes a ripple, a single story, that can be both either positive or muddy the water. So they ask those questions, and it's a good thing that you're there as the real deal to answer them.
Yes, it can be uncomfortable sometimes, I guess. I don't know if teaching is the right word, but discussing ideas and learning and sharing my knowledge and others sharing their knowledge with me. But also, growing up as a farm kid and just, being around someone like my dad who's an entrepreneur, things like cost and profitability are at top of mind too. But, I believe that most of the time, not always, but most of the time, a lot of times when you understand what makes sense financially, a lot of times is the best thing for all of us. Not always, but I think often. And, if you're really committed and you're a family business and you care about the community you operate in, where that line is. But yeah, I think I that's part of what my passion is, to talk to someone like you, is because I enjoy telling the story. I'm passionate about it. The only thing I'd say is I really enjoyed my time with the Pork Leadership Academy, and, really appreciate what organizations like the Iowa Pork Producers Association do. It's kind of somewhat thankless work sometimes. And so I'm thankful for that opportunity, and appreciate that. Or just in general, anyone that wants to learn about how pigs are raised, reach out to those associations, or look at their websites, or follow them on social media, or follow someone like Rex View Farms on social media, and you'll learn. You want to be a resource.
That's perfect. Well, we'll look for more videos from you on your Facebook page. That'll be great. Not everyone who is asked to join the Iowa Pork Leadership Academy is a farmer, but they all know how and why farming plays a significant role in Iowa.
My name is Alicia Humphrey, and I actually grew up in southeast Wisconsin on a fair-to-finish pig farm, a very small farm, and I grew up showing pigs in 4-H and FFA, and really got my interest in pork production. And I found myself at Iowa State University and graduated there in 2014. And from there, I got super involved in the pork industry. I started off at AMVC as a public relations coordinator there, and really wanted to get involved in Iowa Pork. And the Leadership Academy was a great avenue for me to do that. And the Academy is made up of individuals all across industries. So people who are contract growers, people who are involved in the industry, people who have their own sow farms. So it's a really great learning opportunity from people all across the state of Iowa, coming together for some great learning sessions and networking. And one of those fun things about the very first class was a DISC assessment.
Okay, so tell me about that assessment learning. What does it do?
The DISC assessment, you take a kind of a quiz, and it asks you various questions about yourself, and you rate yourself on different topics and areas and interests. And at the end, it kind of gives you a score, or like a letter, and that letter represents you, kind of your personality, what your interest is. So for me, I'm an S. I am a solid S. So an S personality person is all about caring, wanting to make sure others feel appreciated. You have a really deep connection with people. And so that fit me absolutely perfectly in the role that I was in. I planned events. I did employee appreciation. That was my thing. I loved it because that made me feel really good inside as an S personality. And for me, I'm not a numbers person, and that definitely showed in my score. And so that assessment really opened my eyes to, okay, yes, this is who I am, and this DISC assessment truly showed that. But also, we can always improve. Just like pig farmers are constantly improving, as a person, you always want to improve also. And so that was definitely an eye-opening experience, and something I really enjoyed, and very thankful that the program offered that opportunity.
Absolutely. So communication is key, and we're trying to get more farmers to tell their story and to be comfortable telling their story. So no matter how they do it, it's important that they share their perspectives, because everybody listening to this podcast right now, the majority of them don't live on, certainly haven't grown up on a farm. But they still care about farmers and how they're raising animals, and they do want to learn more about the pork before it ends up on their plate. And so in your travels, even within the Leadership Academy, you found that people are fascinated by that cut of pork. And you've gone out and you go around the country, talking about pig farming and pork and what that piece of meat is on their plate and how it all came to be.
Yeah, we got to go out to D.C., but while we were there, we got to participate in a barbecue battle. And so there was lots of food vendors there. Lots and lots of people came through. And as pork producers, we were grilling up some pork loin, cutting up into little pieces, bite size with a toothpick, and people were coming by and eating it. And they were telling us how good it was and how did we cook it. And we were informing them of the 145 cook temperature and, just a simple seasoning on there. And you were just amazed at how excited they were to taste good pork. And they loved it. And they were curious, what kind of meat is this? And we were just excited to share with them it was pork and that we were pork producers and happy that they were eating it and enjoying it. And it was a really great experience to be out there interacting with people visiting Washington, D.C. And part of this Pork Leadership Academy, we actually got to go out to California and we actually got to have a sit-down meal at a restaurant there, and they were serving more local type foods, locally sourced foods, and on their menu was an Iowa pork chop item, and they were excited to cook that for us, and we were proud to eat it there in California, seeing our product making its way all the way to California in a restaurant, a high-end restaurant. It was just fabulous and exciting to be there and to enjoy that and to see it on the menu and predominantly written, this piece of pork is from Iowa.
It's a real source of pride. And I think we all need to remember that while we might take it for granted when we've lived in Iowa our whole lives, even for farmers who've come through farming, their whole generations and upon generations have farmed. And there's a lot of challenges around that in farming. But I think it's important that they remember that folks respect what they do. And it's your job in telling them how to share that story, right?
Really looking forward to connecting with producers, hearing their needs, and helping them find solutions and giving them the resources that they need.
Being a resource, a real person willing to share their perspective on farming in Iowa is a critical job here in Iowa. After all, for generations, we've led the nation in many types of food production, including pig farming. It's only natural that Iowans have questions about pig farming, how and why it's evolved. One of those questions involves environmental conservation. What are pig farmers doing when it comes to protecting our land, our air, and our waterways? I'm Lori Johns. We'll cover that story and more on the next Chop Talk.